Hi everyone. I'd like to share with you a short idea on this week's Parasha, Parashat Hayye, which I think is fundamental to Judaism, and it's also something which I think the late Rav Jonathan Sachs Zatzal epitomized more than anyone else. If we look at this week's Parasha, there is a section which is repeated, and it's this whole section with Eliezer where he's trying to find a match between Rivka and Yitzchak. And Rav Acha, on this repetition, says that it's more pleasing to God, the conversations of the servants of the patriarchs, than the Torah of their descendants. Now, this is a really extreme statement, but he says this because this whole episode with Eliezer, where he's trying to find the match between Yitzchak and Rivka, is repeated. But you have other elements of the Torah which are so important, and they're only ever hinted at. The obvious question is, so why does the Torah put such an emphasis and repeat this whole episode of the creation of this match between Yitzchak and Rivka? In order to answer this question, I think it's first important to understand their respective backgrounds. If we look at Yitzchak, he's grown up under the tutelage of Abraham and Sarah, where he's grown up in this righteous and spiritual environment. And you contrast this with Rivka, who's grown up under the tutelage of Lavan and Besuel. And we know the type of character that Lavan is. And even in this week's Parasha, it's hinted at where he runs towards Eliezer once he's seen that Rivka has all this nice jewellery on her. And Rashi comments that he's done this because essentially he wants to get in on that. He sees this rich person and he wants to potentially take some of it and see what he can get from this individual. And we also know the type of character Lavan is from later on, from the way that he treats Yaakov. From all of this, we can infer that the upbringing that Rivka had was the complete opposite to the one that Yitzchak had. Yitzchak grows up in this spiritual, righteous environment, and you have Rivka, who's grown up in this environment which is completely the opposite. They're obsessed with the physical world and money and things like that. And I think that this leads us on to our answer. We asked, why does the Torah feel the need to repeat and emphasize this match between Rivka and Yitzchak? And I think it's specifically because they have these opposite upbringings, the spiritual and the physical. And I think it's teaching us the importance of fusing those two, that this match between the physical and the spiritual is of utmost importance in Judaism. We think about what happens later on with the giving of the Torah, and the Torah teaches us all these ways of infusing mundane physical acts with spiritual purpose. And I think that fundamental idea is hinted at in this week's Parasha by it repeating this message of this match between these two opposites. And some people ask, but surely it's just important just to stay in this kind of spiritual bubble. And I think the relationship between Rivka and Yitzchak also answers that, because if we look later on with the story of the brachot, you have Yitzchak who wants to give the brachot to Esav, but Rivka, she knows better. She's grown up amongst those types of individuals like Esav. She's more worldly. She understands humanity better, and she knows what a disaster it would be to give the brachot to Esav. And I think specifically because of her upbringing that she was able to know this. And without Rivka, then Yitzchak would have gone down this path, which could have potentially have been a disaster. Now, I think this whole idea of the fusion of the spiritual and the physical is something that Rav Sachs thrived at more than anyone else. He was able to incorporate pretty much everything he learned, both religious and not, in the service of God. And I think that he is someone who is completely irreplaceable. And I think the only thing we can do is try to embody some of the ideas that he taught so beautifully, one of which being something which I've spoken about today, the importance of utilizing this physical world and everything at its disposal in bringing us closer to God, and utilizing it and utilizing this physical world in order to make us more spiritual and bring us closer to God and develop our faith even further. Shabbat Shalom.